affliction, affliction. It's kind of a tradition on the day of Yom Kippur. Leviticus 23. There's a lot of discussion going on about what exactly we're supposed to do on the 10th day of the 7th month. Well, it's recorded amongst other places right here in Leviticus 23, verse 26. Yahuwah spoke to Moshe saying, but on the 10th day of this 7th month, it is Yom Kippurim, the Day of Atonement, there shall be a Mikra Kodesh, a holy convocation as it's translated, for you, and you shall afflict yourselves. You shall offer a fire offering to Yahuwah. You shall not do any work on this very day, for it is the Day of Atonement to provide you atonement before, or that's in the face of, Yahuwah your Elohim. Verse 29, any soul who will not be afflicted on this very day will be cut off from this people. And any soul who will do any work on this very day, I will destroy that soul from among its people. Verse 31, you shall not do any work. It is an eternal decree throughout your generations in all your dwelling places, which includes right here on the Mendocino coast of Northern California, USA. It is a day of complete rest for you, and you shall afflict yourselves. On the 9th of the month, in the evening, from evening to evening, that includes the day of the 10th of the month until the evening of the day of the 10th, shall you rest on your rest day. We're going to talk about that because there's a few different opinions about what that means, and we're going to look at the definition of a few words, specifically the word for affliction, affliction. And Fred's got some insights regarding Isaiah 58. Let's go over where it's a little quieter and we can discuss these things. The thing is, the word affliction is the English word, and the only reckoning we have for what that means is what Brother Yehuda has been doing for the last, well, Moshe was 1500 BC. That's when this was written. It's now 2018. That means for about 3,500 years, the only track record of somebody trying to do this that we have anything to reference is the rabbinical model that Brother Yehuda has been keeping for centuries, but we don't even know where he picked that up. Maybe he picked it up in Babylon, maybe he picked it up scattered amongst the nations, but the point is, we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. There were 12 tribes. Joseph was split into two, Ephraim and Manasseh, so technically there's 13. Some people say the Ashkenazi are another thing, that's maybe 14. The point is, what are we supposed to do to make him happy? He says, you will afflict your souls on this very day for the sake of getting atonement. Getting atonement. But Yeshua died on the cross. Why didn't he say, you will afflict your souls on this very day until the Mashiach comes? That would have made it pretty simple. But it doesn't say that. It says forever. Now the word forever is leolam, and some people say that that word leolam doesn't mean forever. It means to the other side of the horizon that we can't see, the unknown time. Whenever the Messiah shows up is kind of the unknown time. So maybe it means only until the Messiah shows up shall you afflict yourselves on this very day. But the translations we have call this forever. Leolam. Va'ed means forever and ever. If he, Yahuwah, wants us, Israel, his people, to do what he said with a fervent heart, why did he make it so unclear? We're not trying to cause trouble, just so you know. We're trying to do what he said without, I'm going to use an ugly word, without the baggage of tradition, culture, habit, interpretation, but yet we're going to interpret and establish our own tradition because that's all we can do. So just so for what it's worth, if anybody wants to disagree with what we're about to say, go ahead and disagree. If anybody wants to think that we are infidels, you go ahead and think we're infidels. We, with a true heart, are trying to figure out by the words that he gave us, written in Hebrew, what does he want us to do on the 7th month from the evening of the 9th day, 24 hours, until the evening of the 10th day. Thank you, Brother Yehuda, for keeping the regard of these matters through the centuries. Thank you to the rabbis for diligently pushing through all the adversity that you've encountered through the generations. But here we are to receive the baton, and I don't want to just run with a rabbinical order unless it's purely correct. But the question is, what does he tell us? The word spelled Ayin Nun Hey is the word translated affliction. If you look in the dictionary, the first order of translation into English, it says afflict, Ayin Nun Hey, humble, oppress, poverty, to be weighed down. But it also means to reply and give an answer. Somebody sends you a message and you respond. That's the same word. It also means to sing. The very last translation in the dictionary text means to fast. There's another word that means to fast, used elsewhere, but it's not this word, anah, Ayin Nun Hey. So, Ayin Nun Hey doesn't necessarily mean to fast. Now, if you fast, self-imposed, you are afflicting yourself. You are weakening yourself. You are burdening yourself with something that grates against your fleshly cravings, which is to be filled, to be satisfied with some food or water. And some people don't sleep. Some people don't even brush their teeth. They don't bathe. They don't do anything to cater to their personal comforts. I've heard it said that some people put on shirts that are made out of sackcloth or hair, horse hair, something that just drives you crazy, just might as well go roll in these briars to afflict yourself. That's afflicting yourself. And that might be a very good thing to do at some occasion. But is the 9th evening of the 7th month the particular occasion that Yahuwah, our Elohim, has demanded under the penalty of death, and not only death in this life, but to be cut off, severed, and cast aside from being this people, his people? That almost sounds like it has more far-reaching ramifications into the next realm. This is serious business. As a matter of fact, this day is the most serious day in the entire calendar, and we're not messing around by trying to do this. I remember there was a fellow on the internet a couple years ago, and he came out on YouTube wearing a chicken hat. It was kind of a little bit of a farce. And then he took a bite out of a chicken sandwich on the day of Yom Kippur, and it's like, what? You're supposed to be fasting. And he says, ha, it's not that we are supposed to be. That's just a rabbinical tradition. And it was a rabbinical tradition to swing a chicken around the head of their children in order to atone for their sins. And so he was mocking and deriding that custom. I have no intention of mocking or deriding anybody who's trying to keep these instructions. And if because of circumstances throughout history the oppression, the death, the ravaging from the other nations that are oppressing Yahweh's people because they didn't keep his words, and so they're trying to figure out some way to keep his words. I will not disparage that, just for the record. Now, that being the case, is it acceptable to eat food or drink water or to take a nap to comfort oneself on the day when you're supposed to afflict yourself? And Fred found something very interesting in Isaiah 58 regarding this very matter. Now, for the sake of consideration, for the sake of contemplating, meditating, studying, the word in Hebrew midrash, we are droshing the matter. And if somebody else has a different opinion, you're welcome to it. We are presenting this as a case in point to regard, to make sure that we're doing the right thing and not just going along with a cultural tradition of the Yahudim as they were trying to do the best they could. The question is that what Yahuwah wants of us? So what do you got, Fred, for Isaiah 58?
Well, first of all, I want to give credit to my dear friend Terry, who really opened my eyes up to this chapter. In Isaiah, Yahuwah really shares his heart about this very special feast. For many years, I read this chapter in the context of the weekly Sabbath. And Terry showed me, going back into this chapter, how this is very definitely talking about the high Sabbath of Yom Kippurim, a particular Sabbath, not any other Sabbath in the calendar. And
just a second. Take note of that. When I first was, when Isaiah 58 was first brought to my attention, I've read the Bible since I was a little kid, but I never, for some reason, Isaiah 58 just wasn't brought to my attention. And when it was brought to my attention, it was on the bulletin of a Sabbath day service, and it was saying that this was regarding the weekly Sabbath. And so Fred is going to read this, but when it says, "You shall not do any of your personal pleasure on the Sabbath day, and you will not speak of your own words on the Sabbath day," I was instructed at that time that it meant every weekly Sabbath, 52 weeks out of the year, you should never do your own pleasure and never speak your own words, and you should regard the 52 weeks of the Sabbath day, the seventh day of the week, as per the instructions of Isaiah 58. And suddenly, Fred's going to tell us here that it is not regarding the weekly Sabbath, it's regarding one Sabbath. What's called a high Sabbath, or a Shabbat Shabbaton is the Hebrew phrasing, and it's only regarding the day of Yom Kippur, very specifically, and the telltale evidence that that is the case is what he's now going to discuss.
And as you know, in Isaiah, Yahuwah had already told Israel, I hate your Sabbaths. And in this chapter, he's going to correct them on this particular Sabbath. And to share your viewpoint as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, I was taught the same thing, that this was the way to keep the weekly Sabbath. But as you listen to these words, I think you'll realize that this entire chapter is referring to the high Sabbath of Yom Kippurim specifically. Isaiah 58, verse 1. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up your voice like a horn, and declare unto my people their transgression, and to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily, and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness, and forsook not the ordinance of their Elohim. They ask of me righteous ordinances, they delight to draw near unto their Elohim. Now I'm just wondering if you can hear the sarcasm in that second verse. He starts out chastising them, telling them about their transgression, and then in kind of a mocking tone, you hear him talking about how they've been so wonderful.
And this hymn is not Isaiah.
Oh,
this
no.
is Yahuwah himself speaking to Isaiah,
Absolutely.
Yeshayahu, about this matter, because Yahuwah is very disturbed about what's going on, and he's trying to set us on the right course to fit into the whole reason why he implemented these instructions to begin with.
And in verse 3, Yahuwah begins to quote the very things he's hearing from his people. So listen. Wherefore have we fasted, and you see it not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and you take no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast, you pursue your own business, and exact all your labors. Behold, you fast for strife and contention, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. You fast not this day, so as to make your voice heard on high. Is this the fast that I have chosen? The day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down your head like a bulrush, and spread sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, an acceptable day to Yahuwah? Now he's going to begin to teach them. Is not this the fast that I have chosen? To loose the fetters of wickedness, to undo the bands of the yoke, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Is it not to deal your bread out to the hungry, and that you bring the poor that are cast out into your home? And when you see the naked, you cover him, and that you not hide yourself from your own flesh? Then, if you do these things that I just read about, then your light will break forth like the morning, and your healing will spring forth speedily, and your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of Yahuwah will be your rear guard. Then, if you do those things, will you call, and Yahuwah will answer. You will cry, and he will say, Here I am. And if you take away from the midst of you the yoke, the putting forth of the finger, the speaking of wickedness, and if you draw out your soul to the hungry, and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall your light rise in darkness, and your gloom be as noonday. And Yahuwah will guide you continually, and satisfy your soul in drought, make strong your bones, and you will be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water, whose waters fail not. And if they that be of you shall build the old waste places, you shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. If you turn away your foot because of the Sabbath of Yom Kippurim, from pursuing your business on my set-apart day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and set apart of Yahuwah, honorable, and honor it, not doing your wanton ways, or pursuing your own business, nor speaking thereof, then shall you delight yourself in Yahuwah, and I will make you ride upon the high places of the earth, and I will feed you with the heritage of Yaakov your father, for the mouth of Yahuwah has spoken it.
You would take a note of a certain progression. Could you address that
Sure.
when he talks about the dark
Yes.
and the gloomy, and then how the sun rises, the morning, and then the brilliant noonday?
Yeah, listen to the progression here from gloom into verse 8. He talks about your light breaking forth as the morning, the picture of the morning that we experience every day. And then in verse 10, he talks about your light rising in darkness and your gloom being as the noonday. So there's that progression of growing light from morning to noon as he blesses us with his presence and with his protection, with his healing.
So the interesting thing is that the past couple years, we've taken to try to do the very list of things that Yahuwah just told us. What a concept. What did he say to do?
Well, first of all, look at the evidence that this chapter is about Yom Kippurim. He's speaking about afflicting souls. Where else in Scripture did he ever instruct us to afflict our souls but on Yom Kippurim?
You know, the Sabbath day was not implemented from the very beginning, the first week of creation, as an affliction to the soul.
No, nothing but a blessing.
It was a blessing for our restoration, for our rest, for our having a set-apart time to draw close to Him. The Sabbath day general 52 weeks out of the year is not a day of affliction. That's the way it's been presented to us. In order to keep us away from it so that we wouldn't gain the benefits of it, so that we go, ooh, yuck, I don't want to do the Sabbath day. It was a tactic of our enemy to deprive us of all the blessings that were contained in it. But this day of affliction is the very wordage associated with Yom Kippurim, the 9th evening to the 10th evening of the 7th month. So that's how we know this is talking about Yom Kippurim.
Absolutely.
It's not the typical Sabbath day, but it's referred to as the Sabbath because the word Shabbat, spelled Shin Bet Tav, the word Shin Bet literally means to return. It means to sit. So the concept of the Sabbath day is you return back to your house and you sit down. There's not even an instruction that you have to go to meeting on Sabbath day. Sit in your house and take a nap. That's more like a good use of the Sabbath day. That's another matter, but I'm just saying that the word Sabbath doesn't necessarily mean the seventh day. It's the day of rest. He says, do not work, but then he says, as we said, some people wear scratchy shirts, that sackcloth, like wearing a shirt made out of a burlap bag, or rolling around in the briars to scratch yourself and be discomfited, to not wash so you feel yucky. That's afflicting yourself. But he says, is this the fast that I appointed? Really? You think that's what I'm about? That's what he's saying. What was that verse? Where are you saying that? Verse 3?
Yeah, verse 3.
Verse 4? Okay, so what do you got? What does he say that we're supposed to be doing?
To loose the fetters of wickedness.
How do you do that?
So the purpose of afflicting our souls is not to mope around, to walk in sackcloth, to stare at the ground, to be miserable. The point of afflicting our soul was to be a blessing to the oppressed, to loose the fetters of wickedness, undo the bands of the yoke, let the oppressed go free, break every yoke, deal our bread to the hungry, bring the poor that are cast out into our homes, cover the naked, and not hide ourselves from our own flesh, which I take to mean to remember those that are suffering within our own families, within our own group.
So if he's saying that that's what he expects us to do with this set-apart day, and he says later, don't even talk about your business. You know that paint job we're supposed to be doing? Don't talk about it that day. How about that car? How about that business deal we got with the other company? Don't even mention it. Forget all your own business concerns. Concern yourself with the concerns of the poor and destitute, the guys that are sleeping in those trees over there, the guy that's laying in the gutter over there, the guy that's going hungry down on your street corner begging for bread, the guy that's standing on the corner with the sign by the corner of the freeway. Talk to him and say, what do you need? So that's what we've done the past couple years. Gone to those very people, stepping into their house that normally you'd say, gosh, I'm staying away from that part of town. Out of respect, walking into their house, their domain, and saying, is there something you need that we can get for you? I'm not doing my normal work. I'm not sitting down by doing that. But I'm about the business of providing the needs for somebody else. Isn't that what he said?
That's exactly
Food,
what he said.
clothing. Do they need a sleeping bag? Do they need a tent? Do they need a blanket? Do they need a drop cloth? Do they need a flashlight?
They need a shirt. They need pants.
These are things that people just told us that they needed. Now we went to the store on Yom Kippur, and bought those things, and gave them to these people. Are we going to get nailed? Is he going to throw lightning bolts at us because we went to the store and bought something? On that day, we drove in a vehicle, going from camp to camp to camp, all around that town in Sonora to help the people who were you know that word wickedness, loose the bounds of wickedness. Wickedness. What is that wickedness? two words for wickedness. One is reshayin, and the other one is reshayin sheen, but it also means harm, calamity, some misery that's come upon you.
And we met people going through exactly that. And was that experience a blessing to them? I'm sure it was, but I have to tell you, I have to tell you, it was a blessing to us. This day of suffering, this day of affliction, was turned into a day of blessing, because by denying ourselves for a day and turning it to blessing others, we received the blessing.
And as friend Terry pointed out, the greatest affliction was not, gee, I'm thirsty, or gee, I'm hungry. It was, no, money's falling out of my wallet.
Yeah, that's right.
Money out of our wallets went to others without a regard for how much. Well, there was a certain budget, but the point is, whatever they wanted, we went and got for them. There was one fellow who makes it his purpose to clean up the homeless camp, trimming some wild bushes for fire, picking up the trash, though he's scorned by the local law enforcement. So we got him a pair of pruners so that he could, he hurt his shoulder trying to, nobody even knows these guys are out there. Everybody, these bums, these riffraff. The guy is doing everything he can to make the place a better place for that little community living in the woods, drinking filthy water out of the stream, but that's the only water they have. So we brought them some water. If they asked for water, we brought water. One lady asked for some ice cream, so we brought her a thing of ice cream. It was maybe the only little taste treat that she could have for the entire year, but we offered to those who have been scorned and rejected, and maybe it's their own fault, maybe it's finances, maybe it's disease, I don't know, it doesn't matter. We weren't analyzing, and we weren't doing some kind of an inquisition to see whether they were deserving. They're human beings. Don't turn away yourself from your own flesh. Does that mean your own family, your own neighbors? Is this what Yahuwah says he wants us to do on Yom Kippur? Does he ever say, you better not drink something? Did I see you eat that chicken sandwich? Did you sleep when you were tired on this day? How dare you? He doesn't say that. What did he say? 3 verses here. Is this not the fast that I have chosen? Not the rabbis, not the preachers, not the Pope, Yahuwah himself. This is the fast. And we could look up that word if you want. Loose the fetters of, those are the chains, the handcuffs, the yoke, those are fetters of calamity, of misery. It's translated wickedness. To undo the bands of the yoke and let the oppressed go free. Break every yoke. Now, he doesn't go into any more details, but every yoke is every one that those people told us about. We didn't preach to them, but we told them why we were there. Told them it was the Day of Atonement. Told them it was Leviticus 23, Isaiah 58. We talked a little bit to a couple people, but it wasn't a matter of, here, I'll give you what you need if you're hungry, only if you listen to me preach. It wasn't about that. The interesting other thing, I want you to explain how this day that cost us one whole day of our regarding somebody else's needs, and then the turnaround 5 days later was what?
Sukkot. I find it fascinating and typical of our Father that before blessing us with a feast in which he promises to enter among us and to dwell with us, and in which he tells us to just celebrate his goodness, to buy whatever our heart desires, to buy meat and strong drink and just have a beautiful celebration. Before entering that feast, he tells us in no uncertain terms to give of ourselves, of the blessings he has given us, to others, to the point of afflicting our souls, to the point of emptying our wallets, to give what we can to others, to make sure the needs of others are met. whether they're inside the kingdom, outside the kingdom, whether they're part of our family, in or out, doesn't matter. He says, bless those who are suffering around you. And then 5 days later, he invites us into a feast in which he just blesses us with abundance and tells us to just enjoy and relish all the blessings and the goodness and just suck the marrow out of life. And what a beautiful contrast and what a beautiful blessing he offers in response to hearing his words, to give and to share with others.
You know, just as a little curious kind of side note to that, you say that he pours out a blessing for his people that come to spend a week, or there's only 2 days that are commanded not to work, the first day and the last day, the 8th day. But how does he pour out that blessing that you get these finances to enjoy such a Sukkot? Where do those finances come from?
Well, if we read Deuteronomy 16, we'd see that he tells us that the tithe, the 10% of our increase, is to be set aside not to give to the church, not to give to the Pope or to our synagogue. He tells us specifically to take 10% of our increase and use it to celebrate Sukkot, to use it to buy whatever our heart desires, to enjoy this feast, to set aside from his blessings, from our increase, 10% for the experience we're actually having right now of Sukkot, and just have a wonderful time of celebration and relaxation, and to enjoy and celebrate his goodness.
Now imagine that. Have you ever heard that before? Yahweh says in the last pages of Malachi, test me on this. Bring me all the tithes into the storehouse and see if I will not pour out a blessing for you. It's like, oh, okay, well, we got to bring 10%. And every week drop it in the offering plate. But he actually says, when you bring your 10% and drop it in the so-called offering plate, it's not the offering plate really. It's to put it into a container for you to spend for your own pleasure at the week of Sukkot, from the 15th day of the 7th month until the 22nd day. It's 7 days, that's 15 to the 21st, and then there's this last day called Shemini Atzeret, which is the 22nd day. Interestingly enough, the Tav is the 22nd letter, which is the sign of the covenant. It was the 8th day after Sukkot, and if Yeshua was actually born the first day of Sukkot, the day that he came to tabernacle with us, that would have been the day he was circumcised. So if that was the way that played out, the sign of the covenant, some people think he was born the first day of the 7th month, which would have been Yom Teruah, so that would have been a different reckoning. But the point is, he told us to store up the tithe for our use in order to rejoice before him for this week of Sukkot, and I spent 50 years of my life in the church never hearing that matter. Amazing.
Amazing. Amazing. And we've missed that blessing because of it. Because of that false teaching, we've all missed out on the blessing of Sukkot, what it's supposed to be about.
Some friends were telling me that another organization years ago, 10,000 strong, would go up to Canada, Osuyos, and take over the whole community and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars that they had saved up, just dumping it into the local economy and having a hoot because it was the festival of Sukkot. Oh, he's such a mean God. No, he's not. He's Yahweh, our Elohim, and he lavishes his goodness on us if we listen to his words, try to take them to heart, and do them. So the point is, we could do a little analysis of the various words that are in Hebrew, but I'm not going to do that because that's other videos. But what I'm saying is that the one word, ayin nun hey, means respond, answer. Any man who will not afflict his soul in this day, could be read, any man who will not respond from his soul on this day will be cut off. Any man who will not sing from his soul on this day will be cut off. But it's translated, any man who will not afflict himself and fast and not drink on this day. Oh, it's a different character. who do we serve? The word serve is obedience, obed. But that same word obed means worship. Obedience in his language of Ivrit, Hebrew, is worship. To respond and sing with a light heart of blessing on Yom Kippur is worshiping him.
Absolutely.
And yet, this day of Yom Kippur has been robbed from the entire Christian church, at least since Constantine, the 321 Council of Nicaea, when he made it illegal, and certainly for years before that, while all the torment was going on, where the church was wrestling with what are the protocols now that the Messiah has showed up, and that's a whole nother story. But we're not addressing that. We're just bringing these matters to bear for consideration.
And the tragedy of that is we miss these blessings, that our light will break forth like the morning, and that our healing will spring forth speedily, and that our righteousness will go before you, and that the glory of Yahuwah will follow us, and that when we call, Yahuwah will answer. These are the blessings tied to Yom Kippurim.
Let me just say one thing regarding verse 9. It says here, you shall call and Yahuwah will answer. You will cry and he will say, here I am. You know why that's so insignificant? Why that's so important? Is because there's other verses that we've mentioned before in other videos where Yahweh says, if you don't listen to me when I speak, I will not, I cannot. It blocks his ears from listening when we scream, because our enemies are coming against us and killing us and ripping us apart and breaking things and stealing away our life and our children and our house. It's like he cannot hear our prayers if we don't hear his instruction. He says that very clearly many times, and I've never heard that taught. If we don't hear and respond and do what he says, he cannot and will not hear our prayers. Though we cry out in distress from the depth of our hearts, he said, though, if we will regard this day as he instructed, he will hear our prayer, and he will say, Hineni, here I am. What do you need? I'll give it to you. If we listen to the cries of the oppressed that are around us and give them what they need out of our own resources. This is an incredible promise.
He will guide us continually. He'll satisfy our souls. He'll make our bones strong. We'll be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters fail not. Aren't these the promises that we've clung to, and yet we've failed to understand that these are the result of keeping this day?
That's why we should keep Yom Kippur, and that's why we should do the best we can to know exactly what he requires of us, because we're just greedy enough to want those blessings for ourselves. You got anything to add there?
I'm good.
You're good.
Well, goodbye from the Mendocino coast and Sukkot 2018.
Shalom.
Shalom.